Okay, welcome everyone back to the Abundance Club. I'm so excited to welcome the beautiful Julie Ryan into the club today. Julie is a psychic medium and a medical intuitive. She's also an author, an entrepreneur who beautifully blends business, science, and spiritual wisdom, which I love. She's the founder of multiple companies, the inventor of surgical devices sold worldwide, and also the host of the hit podcast Ask Julie Ryan, which is ranked in the top 0.05% globally. Incredible. Julie helps people decode the unseen to heal, awaken, and live beyond logic. And today she's here to share her wisdom, her insights, and experience and guidance with us all. Welcome, Julie, to the Abundance Club.
Thank you so much, Miss Amy. I'm delighted to be here with you.
I'm so excited, Julie, because I love, love, love all of these topics. And it just feels really up there in terms of what we love to dive into and go deep on inside of the Abundance Club. So I'm looking forward to seeing how this conversation will flow. I'm sure it will be amazing. Where I want to start, because I love what I read here in that you help people decode the unseen to heal
Mhm.
and awaken and to live beyond logic. So, to start with, when did you first notice your own psychic gifts, like really coming online? And how did you learn to start to really trust your own intuition? Can you share a little bit about that journey to begin
Sure, I'd
with?
be delighted to. Yeah, I'd be delighted to. I am not a psychic who had dead people chasing her as a child. Or if I did, I didn't know it, let alone what I would have done with that information. I learned how to do all of this stuff in my mid 30s. A friend gave me a book called Anatomy of the Spirit by Carolyn Mace, and she called herself a medical intuitive. And I thought, what the heck is that? I'd never heard that term. This was more than 30 years ago. And I wanted to know more. So I went to the bookstore because we didn't have the internet yet, which seems so crazy to say. We think, how could we survive without the internet? But it hadn't been invented, or if it had been invented, we regular people weren't using it. And at the bookstore, Amy, I found a book called Hands of Light by Barbara
Mm.
Brennan, she's deceased now. She was a former NASA physician, not physician, physicist, former NASA physicist who parlayed very complex quantum physics complex, problems and philosophies and stuff into understandable English for the non-scientific mind. That would be me. And physicians and other healers were using it to help people heal. And I thought, oh, good heavens, what is this? And I wanted to know more. Now, at this point, I'd been in the medical business for 10 years on the hospital supply side. I, at that point, had invented surgical devices. To your point earlier, I was manufacturing them. So I was helping people heal, but on the supply side. And I was interested to see what I could learn. So I called Barbara Brennan's school. At the time, it was on Long Island in New York. And I said, do you guys have anybody teaching this stuff in my area? And that lo and behold, they did. And then I studied with my mentor, who was a graduate of Barbara Brennan School, and then added her own techniques into kind of her own goulash, if you will, of healing. And I studied with her for 6 years. Now I teach people how to do all this stuff in a weekend. 2 weeks ago, just finished my in-person training. We had people in from multiple countries in Atlanta, Georgia, here in the US. And you learn the whole buffet of psychicness. Once I got connected with spirit, what I realized, Amy, was you can do it all. I
Mm.
don't understand why the woo-woo space is siloed. You got the psychics and the medical intuitives and the pet psychics and the, other kinds of healers and the past life people. It's all the same thing.
Mm.
Once you connect with
Mm.
spirit, you can do it all.
Mm.
So that's what I teach. And it's evolved over the last 30 years, where Barbara Brennan was when she wrote this stuff 50 years ago. Yes, a lot of the principles have remained. The delivery systems are different. We used to
Mm.
use carrier pigeons to communicate, and then we used horseback riders to deliver messages, and then we got the mail eventually, and now we communicate instantly through our technology, and it's advanced in that way in the what I call the woo-woo space as
Yeah.
well.
I think it's so beautiful, the way that you speak to almost the simplicity of it, because I think that we haven't been raised to really trust in the unseen. In fact, I think for a lot of people, particularly when we're navigating change or when we're learning like how to manifest or we're learning how to connect with the spirit realm, we haven't learned how to really trust in what we can't see and touch and feel with our like, a limited physical senses. So, can you speak a little bit more about the accessibility of this work or this? And these are really just innate skills that we all have, the accessibility for us to tap into that. I mean, you teach people in a weekend, which is amazing, but also shows that it's here, it's available, and it's accessible to us all right now. Can you speak a little bit about that?
Sure. Everybody comes in with the ability. Our heads are like big satellite dishes and they receive and they transmit frequencies. Every spirit has a frequency they keep throughout all of their lifetimes. Every thought has a frequency. So, in order to get in touch with any spirit, whether it's attached to a body because that person's still alive, or whether it's a spirit in heaven, all we have to do is think of them. It's irrelevant whether you knew them or not. You just think of them. That tunes your satellite dish head to their frequency, and it opens up something similar to a two-way radio communication. And you say something, you ask a question, you make a statement, and they're going to respond instantly, fast as you can snap your fingers. That's how you know that's coming from spirit because they're going to answer you within a second or less.
Mm,
Sometimes they'll answer even before you finish thinking your thought or
mm,
asking your question. And that really trips people up a lot of the time because they'll say, well, I haven't even finished my question yet. Well, time doesn't exist in the spirit world,
mm,
time's a human creation. So they've already got what we're saying to them and they're responding. And like anything else, it's practice. The more you do it, the more validation you get, the more validation you get, the more you trust it. And then it's just second nature. It's like you can throw a football, but you're not going to be playing, in pro sports unless you throw that football millions of times and you get really good at that. And it lays neural pathways in the brain, whether you're throwing a football or a basketball, or whether you're talking to spirit or doing any of this woo-woo stuff that I call it woo-woo because woo in Taoism means source.
mm,
And people say woo woo, and it just kind of makes them chuckle a little bit and it disarms them a little instead of saying, well, you have to prove this to me. Well, we've all had it proven to us multiple times. How many of us? I just had this happen this morning with a girlfriend. I called her and she said, I promise you, I just wrote your name on a label to put on a box to send to you. We think of somebody and they either call us or they text us or they email us or we run into them and we say, oh my gosh, I was just talking to you.
mm,
I
mm,
was just thinking of you and here you are.
mm.
And we're all healers too, Amy. Most of us have had a child that's skinned their knees and we kiss them, we kiss their boo-boos, we comfort them and then we send them back to play. And that's being a healer.
Yeah, yeah.
We all do that.
Mm. How can we start to deepen that connection for someone that's newer on this path? And also, how important is it to understand a little bit more about what your dominant, let's say, psychic sense? So you mentioned about, like tuning the station, tuning the signal, and it's here and it's available, and that it can come in really quick. So do you teach people about understanding their clairs or what's the most dominant way that spirit's communicating to them, whether that's through auditory or in the signs? Like how important is that for somebody to understand what their kind of dominant psychic language is?
I think it's very important. And I teach it in a way that's going to be the most easily accessible for them. A visual learner's going to see things. An auditory learner's going to hear things. A kinesthetic learner's going to feel things. And The clairs are weeds to me. I don't get stuck in the weeds.
Mm.
I'm like, don't worry about it. See how it comes in for you. What's the easiest way that it comes in for you when you ask a question? It's going to feel like a thought in your head. It's going to feel like it's your thought when you're communicating with spirit. And all spirit communication is numeric. It's all numbers because numbers in math are the universal language. So spirit communicates in numerals. The numerals come into everybody's head, and our brains decode the numerals.
Mm.
And they can come in a multitude of ways. They can be a vision, they can be a picture in your head. They can, as I mentioned, it can be something you hear, something you smell. You get goosebumps, you feel cold, you, uh, any one of those and many, many more. The key is to trust the first thing that comes in. That's really the key. And then be open to how what the meaning is. Because I may see a vision of a grasshopper. And so I'll tell my client, let's look up the spiritual meaning of a grasshopper. And there's always a spiritual meaning, when they send us a flower or a bug or a animal or something. And and so that gives us a clue. It's kind of like they want us to go on a treasure hunt in a way. And then I'll say, be open to how you're going to see that grasshopper. You may see one in person. You may see the picture of a grasshopper. You may see it on an ad on a billboard. You may see it in a movie. You may see it on a piece of jewelry. Just be open, and all of those count. So it's a matter of trusting. There's so many things that we trust that we don't know how they work, like
Yeah.
anesthesia. People that have surgery, most of them get anesthesia. But you ask any anesthesiologist, they don't know how it works. They
Mm.
know it works, but they don't know how it works. But
It's
we
like
trust it.
electricity. We can't see, like in Wi-Fi, we can't see
Yeah,
it. We
yeah,
trust it though.
that's
Right.
right.
Yeah.
That's right. So it's really fascinating, and it's really just developing new neural pathways in the brain.
Yeah, yeah. I love that. I've had a few people who I know who've crossed over this year, and I communicate as well with those who have passed on, and often a way that they come through for me, and I've shared this in a podcast episode recently, is through birds or animals. And once I shared this story that I'd had a student of mine, because I taught yoga for many years, that I'd found out had passed on. And I was sitting up in bed one day and I asked her if she could give me a sign in the form of a bird. I said, you might like to come in as a bird. I said, however, and this is my logical mind coming in, I said, I'm in bed at the moment. I'm not feeling that well, so I'm actually not outside. So maybe I'm not going to see a bird. And then the next thing from downstairs, my husband's gone, oh my God, Ames, you better come down here. And there was a kookaburra, which is a native Australian bird,
Sure.
that had
Yeah.
flown into our house and it was sitting on our breakfast table. It was
Oh,
sitting
I have
on
full
our
body chills. I love it.
kitchen bench. And
I love
then
it.
my son has gone out to go to school, my 11-year-old son, his name is Phoenix. And he walks out to go out the front gate and then he runs back upstairs and he's holding something and he says to me, Mum, this is for you. And it flew down from the sky in front of him and it was a kookaburra feather.
There you go.
So,
So two big things within the matter of a couple of minutes.
right.
Yeah.
So the ways, and I know, I shared this on a podcast, and I had so many people contacting me saying that since listening to the podcast, they'd been seeing a lot of different signs by the way of birds coming in and communicating. So how can we begin to attune more deeply to those messages and that guidance, whether it's coming through our pets, spirit guides, deceased loved ones? Is it about asking to be shown? Like, how can you encourage people to start to connect with those maybe who are no longer in the physical form?
Well, yeah, ask for a sign. If you're in deep grief because you just lost somebody, ask your loved one to come visit you in your dreams.
Mm.
And our brains reset back to the factory preset level of spirit every night when we sleep. And people say, well, how do you know that? I say, well, because that's our natural state. Look at any baby. Babies are happy unless they're hungry or they need to be changed or they're in pain or they're tired. That's our natural state. Babies and toddlers till they're taught.
Mm.
No, that, you got to behave this certain way. So there's that number one. The other thing is when we look up things like, did you look up what the spiritual meaning of the kookaburra was?
I didn't because I just knew that it was from her, but I have previously, and I know that it represents a lot of joy because the kookaburras
Yeah,
laugh as well.
yeah. Yeah.
So whenever I see the kookaburra come in and I hear the call of the kookaburra, which is laughter, I know that I'm needing to have that message of lighten up and experience joy. So I do love that. I also had the other night, I'm walking along the street at night with my dad, my father, who's 85, and my son, who's 11, and we spotted this huge, long python just about a meter in front of us.
Oh, Lord.
And if my son hadn't spotted it, I mean, we would have come very, very close to it. And it just, so yes, straight away I'm like, okay, what's the spiritual meaning? Like
Yeah.
what's the medicine of the python that I need to see? I mean, I think that the spirit realm is communicating with us all the
Oh,
time.
absolutely.
Mm,
Absolutely. And your loved one is not the python. The
mm,
loved one sends the python. When I was a kid, long before we had the internet, my parents, I'd ask them, okay, what does this word mean? And they'd say, well, go look it up, which just used to irritate the daylights out of me. I'd say, well, can't you just tell me? And they said, no, you need to go look it up. And in doing that, they knew that when I read it, I would remember the meaning of it way better than if they just told it to me. And I think spirit does the same thing. They kind of send us on a little bit of a treasure hunt to look up what's going on. And the kookaburra, speaking of being a kid, I know that song in the kookaburra in the old, isn't it the old oak tree?
yeah, the old gum tree.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Laugh,
Yeah.
kookaburra laugh. Yeah.
Yeah. So I hadn't thought of that in a million years. How fun. How can people learn to communicate with spirit and get signs? Just ask, send me a sign. And that's that first thing that comes into their head again. Also, when they see something and they have the thought, oh, my dad sent that, or oh, Aunt Susie sent that. Yes, you're right. It's that first thought.
Yeah.
What we
Yeah.
do is we try and rationalize, we try and think our way out of it. Oh, it's just my imagination. That's not really real. Well, yes, it is. And
Mm.
the more you do it and the more you trust it, the more validation you get, then it's just second nature.
We tend to complicate things more, don't we? Like think
We
that it
really
must
do.
be. I always say,
Yeah,
like, if you think it's a sign, it's a sign.
it absolutely is a sign.
Mm.
Yes,
I want to talk about your beautiful book, and I love the name of it, Angelic Attendance. You've got it there, haven't you? I just
I
feel
do.
like, so this is
I feel
what
like a game show
I
hostess.
love it. If you're watching this on YouTube, you'll be able to see it. Otherwise, if you're not, you can
Yeah.
go and have a look at it. What really happens after we transition from this life to the next? Can you speak to, because I love this, like when you've just got a fascination with something, for me, it is about what happens when we go and this transition. Can you speak about what inspired the book and what you
Sure.
personally have found the most fascinating on your journey into discovering more about what happens when we do cross over?
Well, it's more about what's happening as we're dying. There's
Mm,
lots of information about the afterlife. There's lots of information about near death experiences. There's lots of information about how to deal with grief. Not much out there about what's happening as we're actually dying.
mm,
And that's what my book is about. It's as we, angelic attendance, what really happens as we transition into the next life.
mm,
And so there's, we're all surrounded by angels. We're all surrounded by the spirits of deceased loved ones and pets. And we go through what I've coined the 12 phases of transition. And the book even has diagrams in it about how the angels and your loved ones are
mm,
positioned. The interesting thing about this, Amy, is a year after I released Angelic Attendance, university based research was released showing that 90% of people see the spirits of deceased loved ones and pets at the end of their lives. 90%.
mm,
That's amazing. And we think, oh, grandma's just hallucinating because she's seeing her deceased mother who's been dead for 40 years.
mm.
No, she's not. She's actually seeing her mother's spirit and she can converse with her mother's spirit. And so that's what the research shows. And I love it when science catches up with woo
Yeah,
woo, don't you?
I
Woo woo's
do.
been
Yeah.
around a whole lot longer. And so what happens is when I first saw this was with my own mother when she was dying in 2002. And I'd never been around anybody who was dying before. This was all new experience for me. And I think everybody in my family except my father. And my heart was breaking on one side because it was very unexpected and she was in hospice in a hospice facility. And on the other side, I was seeing all this glorious stuff going on with
Yeah.
angels and spirits of deceased loved ones. And I was thinking, whoa, what is this? And then I saw it over several years afterwards. And then I was led to write the book. May I share that story? That's a fun story.
Please do. Yeah.
I was with my mentor and she was doing a healing on me. And when she's doing a healing on me, I'm laying face up on a massage table, and my deceased loved one's spirits are lining both sides of the table. Even my late dog, Katie, is on her hind legs and her little paws are, she's up helping with the healing. So this one day, this spirit of this dead Pope shows up, and he's got his Pope hat on and his shepherd's rod, whole 9 yards. And I said, "Well, who are you?" And he said, "I'm Clement." And I said, "I'm so sorry. I went through 12 years at Catholic school, but I've never heard of a Pope Clement." And he laughed and he said, "Well, I was number 6." I said, "Okay, how may I help you?" My Susan could see him too. And he said, "You're supposed to teach the world what happens when somebody dies." And I said, um, "I'm a businesswoman. And if I do that, people will think I'm nuts. So thanks, but no thanks. I really appreciate you stopping by, but I'm not interested." And he laughed and he said, "Yeah, yeah, yeah, yeah. Everything you've done in your career has prepared you for this. And
Mm.
you know what happens. And it's been so bastardized over the millennia. People are so afraid to die. And there's nothing to be afraid of. It's glorious. And you know it. So get on with it. You need to teach the world." And again, I said, "Thank you so much for stopping by. I'm really not interested." Get in my car to leave. Probably 15 minutes later, Amy. And I looked him up on my phone just for kicks, just to see if I could find anything about this guy. Come to find out, this Pope was in office during the Black Plague when
Wow.
two-thirds of Europe died, and he's best known for his prayers for the dying and his prayers for the dead. And I thought, for God's sakes, Ryan, you can't make that up. So a couple more years, there's 3 parts to this story, but it's hilarious. So if I may continue, I I was in church a couple years later, my husband and my son on either side of me, and the priest from the pulpit during a sermon says, "Wouldn't it be nice if somebody could really tell us if we're greeted by angels and our loved ones and really, led to heaven?" And I'm getting elbowed from my men on either side of me. And I'm thinking, God, seriously? From the pulpit in church? You're giving me grief about this? And so I thought, all right, all right, all right. So I wrote the book, put up a website, and thought, all right, I'm going to put myself out there. And if it hurts my businesses, I'll deal with it. Few weeks later, I'm speaking at a business conference in Texas. The end of my talk, and these are all C-suite men. I think there were 2 women in the audience. It was all men, hundreds of them, C-suite guys. And this guy comes up to me, he's got his iPad open and to askjulieryan.com. And he said, "Is this you?" And I'm thinking, "Buddy, that's my picture." "Yeah, that's me." And I'm thinking, "Oh, here we go." And he said, "I'd like to sit with you at lunch because I want to know more about this." And I'm thinking, great, I could just get hammered for an hour at lunch. So I sat with him at lunch. It was a table of 8. I'll always remember this, Amy. It was a table of 8. It was 7 C-suite guys and me at the table. And all they wanted to talk about was woo woo. They didn't want to talk about the
Mm.
conference, about what my talk covered, what anybody else's talk covered. They just wanted to talk about the spiritual stuff. And I thought, okay, God, all right, I'm in. I'm in. And that was how this all came about. But it was really a gift from my mother, who was a teacher and a principal,
Mm.
interestingly enough. And at her funeral, At the end of every Roman Catholic funeral, there's a prayer said or sung called In Paradisum. And it talks about how the angels and your loved ones will greet you and lead you into paradise. It's Latin, translated into English, into paradise. And I had heard that prayer a bunch of times at many, many funerals that I'd attended over my lifetime. But I really heard it at my mother's funeral because that's what I saw happen. I saw the angels and the loved ones greet her and lead her into paradise. And I thought, all right, there's way more to the story than this. And interestingly enough, too, when I was writing Angelic Attendance, I wanted to know where that began. Where did that prayer originate? And I learned that it began as a 5th century Gregorian chant. And I thought, well, perhaps it took till the 5th century till somebody was well educated enough that they could read and write. Certainly, those were men, usually monks, living in monasteries and synagogues. They were the scribes. And then I thought, these guys have been able to see this stuff since the beginning of time. I'm just bringing it back around in a modern way to let people know, okay, this is what happens. There's prayers from the 5th century talking about it. And here's what goes on. You can't make this stuff up,
Yeah,
Amy.
I was just about to say you cannot make this up. There are
Yeah,
so many places I want to go with this. Firstly, what I'm being guided to ask is around this when you talk about this transition, which I think is so beautiful, and I often feel into this myself around the soul transitioning and obviously at that point, like because there's a part of me that always wants to go deeper and go like, why is that? Why is it then that we see it? And the veil becomes so much thinner, and perhaps because we're in a surrendered state, perhaps because there's that destiny of knowing that this is the inevitability of the transition, and so we're able to see that. And how much do you feel that our soul exists here in our body, but is also there with our, and this is going pretty woo, that's also existing there with our loved ones?
yeah,
And do you want to speak about, because it's just something that I felt to feel into, and
yeah,
I
yeah,
and I'd had a
yeah.
sense with those who were transitioning that we start to go more into the spirit realm, like more and more into the spirit realm and out of our body, to the
Right.
point that I had another yoga studio student once, and she was a devoted meditation student. Every morning would meditate for a couple of hours, and she was told by
Mhm.
spirit the day that she was going to die. She had cancer, and she didn't die that day, but she did go to hospital, and she was in hospital for probably about 2 weeks until she actually physically passed. And I spoke
Mhm.
with her husband afterwards, and he's a very spiritual man as well. And he said to me, but I think she did. I think her soul went that day that she said, and then the physical body. So do you have anything to offer around this, around what I'm?
Yeah, yeah. I was taught in Catholic school that the soul or the spirit is someplace in the chest area. That's not what I perceive. What I perceive is our spirit, our soul, same means the same thing. I use spirit because soul sounds religious to me. Spirit sounds more universal to me. I think it's just a personal preference. The spirit's the main part of us. The body's inside the spirit. And there's this membrane around the body and the spirit's energy combined that I call the energy field membrane. So that's oftentimes we'll see a religious painting with a halo around the person's head or around their whole body. And we think, oh, that guy must have been really holy because he's got a halo. Well, guess what? We all have halos. It's our energy field, it's our aura, it's all the same thing. And it's my perception, Amy, that when the spirit and the body start to separate, the spirit hangs on to the top of the head of the body in a speech bubble configuration. I call it the spirit bubble. Similar to if you look at a cartoon and the characters' thoughts or their words that they're speaking. It's the spirit bubble. And that's the first phase of transition. And then the angels come in and the other spirits and pet spirits. And we can get into that more in a minute. To your point about, is there a part of our spirit still in heaven while we're also in a human form. There are many schools of thought that we live multiple lifetimes concurrently, and we are all a fractal of the divine, which means that a part of our spirit does remain in what I call heaven, in the non physical. Now, when I try and think about all of that from a human perspective, it makes my head want to explode. I
Yeah.
just want to say, what? Do I understand it? No. Is it feasible? Yes. Does spirit tell me that it's not only feasible, it's true? Yes.
Mm. Mm.
Do I know I'll understand it when I get back to heaven? Yes, I believe I will. So
Yeah.
that satisfies my curiosity. I find it fascinating though when that happens.
Yeah.
And you think about too, whenever anything happens, whether it be another lifetime or something in this lifetime, we can go back and we can access that. If it's this lifetime, everybody can access memories. If it's past lifetimes, you and I can access them by raising our vibrational level and we're able to go to different realities. But once something happens, it's set, it's happening.
Mm.
And so it's still happening concurrently as we're advancing in our lives and aging and having new experiences and all of that. That's the only explanation that really kind of sort of makes a little bit of sense to me
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
how that works. What do you think?
Yeah, thank you for that. I think, like you, I think our mind can't quite comprehend it. And it almost feels like our mind isn't meant to. It doesn't have the capacity, but it's more of that knowing on a, I mean, I use the word soul, but spirit as well. Like it's more of that knowing on a spiritual level. And when we look at, time doesn't exist, so therefore the past life is actually all of our lives are happening simultaneously. And I love what you said about, tapping into the frequency of that, and
Mhm.
that all there is this right now. But thank you for commenting on that, because it felt similar to what I've always felt and tuned into about us existing here but existing elsewhere, and being able to also call on our team, like our I call it our soul team, or our guidance team, that we know and we have been with prior to coming in and incarnating, and that we can access that guidance team. I always say, like, a lot of our guides can feel a little bit redundant because we're not asking for them to come in and help, or asking for the signs, or asking to be shown this. Like, we need to be in that dialogue and communication with them. Do you feel that as well?
Absolutely. And that's what they all say. Hey, we're here.
Mm.
Ask us. They're not going to interfere,
Yeah.
but they're going to help us whenever we ask.
Mm.
And I think a fallacy that a lot of people believe is that they're reading our minds. They're not. That's an invasion of our privacy and our free will. The thing that I found over 30 years of doing this work, however, is spirits are really literal, really literal. Like you say, I want to live an abundant life. Well, that's what you're all about, right? Is the abundance thing. Be specific. What do you want abundance on? You don't want an abundance of more fat on your thighs, for God's sakes. Most women don't. But you want financial abundance. You want love life abundance. You want abundance in your vegetable garden. You want the plants to grow. You want the vegetables to be abundant. Be specific. And another example that I use a lot is it with the how literal spirits are is when spirit gives us a message, how applicable it is will be predicated on how we ask the question, especially if we're asking for guidance. For example, if we say, "Hey mom, are we going to enjoy the movie?" And you hear a yes, first thing comes into your head. So you and your family are watching some movie that night and it's awful. And you're going, "Mom, what's up with that? This movie's terrible. Why'd you tell us we'd enjoy it?" Well, when you think about it, the way you ask the question could pertain to any movie you're going to watch throughout the rest of your life.
Mm.
If, however, you had posed the question in a way that was similar to, "Hey, mom, are we going to enjoy watching the new Mission Impossible movie on Netflix tonight on TV?" See how specific that is?
Yeah.
So I teach people when they're looking, especially for guidance, to be super specific. I have uh, another fun aside about that. I have a dear friend named Perdita Finn, And she talks to her loved ones in heaven all the time. And every morning before she gets out of bed, she has a checklist. Mom, I need you to do this. Guardian Angel, I need you to do that. Uncle Harry, I need you to do this. And she said everything she asks for happens.
Mm.
She gives them a checklist, her loved ones in spirit, her
Yeah.
spirit guides, even even people that she knew as a child who've been long dead, like the ice cream truck driver. She has a message for him and a task for him. She is it's really interesting to
She
hear
puts
her
them to
stories.
work. She puts them to
Yeah.
work, gives them job. I love that too. Like quite often I will hand things over. I'll say, I do not know the solution for this. I cannot deal with it. Could you take care of this? Can you show me the way? So how do you then ask? You mentioned that, they're not mind readers. And I think a lot of the times we will do our prayers or our asking in our mind. Is that something? And I now have shifted to doing my form of prayer out loud, like I'm talking with a friend, I'm talking with the creator, I'm talking with my spirit guides. How do you, Julie, specifically ask for the guidance, communicate with your spirit team?
Normally it's in my head because again, the satellite dish concept. I think of AI as attention intention.
Mm.
Where's your attention? My attention is on Pope Clement, my spirit guide, who, by the way, always shows up with his Pope hat on for 10 years. And I said to him one day, Clement, I know who you are. You don't have to wear the hat. He said, but it looks good, don't you think? They're hilarious. Have you
Yeah,
found that? Spirits are
yeah,
hilarious.
very much so.
Hilarious.
Yeah.
So I'll think of Clement. That's opened up my two-way radio communication with my satellite dish hat, and I'll ask him something and I'll
Mm,
be specific.
mm.
A lot of the time, too, I will, and I also teach to preface any kind of question, especially if it's an advice, piece of advice you're looking for, is to preface it with, is it in my best interest to
Yeah,
dot, dot,
yeah,
dot.
yeah,
And then that takes into account all the bazillions of variables that are going to come into play that can affect an outcome in the future because all future events are fluid. Your
yeah.
free will, somebody else's free will, the weather, pandemics, whatever. And
Mm.
so I have found over the years, Amy, that when I preface it with, is it in Amy's best interest to dot, 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 finish this sentence, then we really get guidance that's actionable.
Yeah, I love that. I'm glad you mentioned that. I think it's really important. I often ask, like, is this for my highest good? Because I think, as you said, there's so many different potentials, there's so many different potential possible outcomes, but we want the one that's most in alignment for us and
Right.
for our highest path. Before I go on to the next one, do you want to mention about the book that you have available for
Sure. Yeah,
people?
yeah, yeah. Anybody that wants a free copy, just go to askjulieryan.com. It's on the home page. You'll see, click here for a free, we'll send you a free digital and audiobook version. We have it in Spanish as well for those that
Amazing.
prefer Spanish. If you've ever lost a loved one, if you ever think you're going to die, which we all have
Yep.
had
None of us
both
are
of
getting
those,
out of this alive.
nobody's getting out of this alive, right? Is what they say. It really is going to give you so much information to help you navigate the end of life for a loved one. And when we're with somebody who's dying, whether we're aware of it or not, we're all thinking, we're going to be there one day ourselves. I wonder what's happening. And it gives us lots of information and lots of wonderful stories about families with whom I've worked. And again, you just can't make this stuff up.
Mm.
The animals that are there that we describe to the family members, the loved ones who are there, hey, did your grandma grow up on a farm? Because there's horses and cows and chicks and ducks and pigs and lammies and stuff like that, animals like that there. And they'll say, yeah, how did you know? I said, because I can see them.
Mm.
And I'll describe the pets and I'll say, well, there's a collie and there's a beagle, and they know the names of the pets, their family pets. And that gives them so much comfort. Many churches and synagogues give this book to families that come in to plan a funeral or families that have a loved one that's nearing the end of their lives. And then many, many hospice organizations give my book to people, and the emails and the Amazon reviews, or I think we're over 600 Amazon reviews, and they're just heartwarming. Like, oh my goodness, I wish I would have known this when my dad was dying. This helped me get through this. This gave me peace. I played the recording for my mom who was dying, who couldn't read anymore, but she could hear. And so, yeah, it's
Such a
really
gift. Thank you,
it
Julie. I mean, it's such a generous gift as well, but it is something that like this affects all of us, right? As you
does,
said. And I think we haven't been taught really about death. I think that
right?
often we have it, it just naturally has this negative stigma around it. And obviously there's a lot of the human grief that we experience, but I've also heard it that transition that it's referred to as a really beautiful it can be a really beautiful thing to witness. It can be a really beautiful joy thing, like birth, like when we come into this world.
Mhm.
And I've also heard it described as, when you pass over, it's like you wake up, like waking up from a dream, like taking off
Mhm.
a tight shoe and going, oh, when you wake up from a dream, you're like, oh, that was just a dream. And you wake up and you're like, oh, I thought that was real. Like that felt so real when I was in it. So I think, these conversations and that work, Julie, is so important. So thank you for doing that and sharing it. And something else I want to touch on that you mentioned earlier about being prepared. You mentioned how doing the business, being a businesswoman had prepared you for this work. And I do see that in clients that I work with in my own experience as well, how life is or like preparing us for our journey. And that takes me to the question of how much do you feel this life, what we are experiencing, is chosen by us, is predestined, is predetermined versus, I mean, obviously we have our free will, but how much is fated versus, created along the way, do you feel?
I think it's all created. It's been my experience that we come in with a script of something that we want to explore and experience. Let's say you want to be a teacher in this lifetime. Well, there are a whole lot of ways you can teach. You can be a parent who's a teacher, teaching your kids. You can be a teacher in a school, lots of different age groups you can teach. You can be a corporate teacher. You can be a teacher as a sales rep. You can be a teacher as an author. You can be a teacher as an artist. I mean, it's limitless. And many of us will explore different ways to be a teacher, just as an example, in the same lifetime. I do what I call past life scans. I don't hypnotize or regress anybody. I envision going into a lifetime, and there's a whole process that takes a nanosecond that I do. I'm an entrepreneur, so I have to do it differently, of course. And I envision myself, like if I was going to do a past life scan on you, Amy, I envision myself in this endless hallway. It's the Amy hallway. I believe in the Akashic records. I don't know what the Akashic records were till a few years ago,
Mm.
but I've been accessing past lives for decades. So the walls are very narrow, the ceiling is very tall, and there are these great big huge square mirrors all lined up perfectly vertically and horizontally. Because of course order, in the spirit world is paramount. So they're all lined up perfectly. Each mirror represents a different lifetime. So I'll say, does Amy have any past lives in which she was a teacher? And those mirrors that correlate with that question will come out from the wall as if they're on a hydraulic arm. And then I'll say, show me the one that correlates the most. And that one will come out the farthest. And I'll see myself jogging down the Amy Hall of mirrors. And I'll go in front of the mirror that's come out the farthest and I'll envision walking into it. And I'll be shown, it's like I'm walking into a movie scene, where it was, when it was, what was going on, a little bit about what was happening at the time. Oftentimes, we'll get not only the information about location, but we'll get what your name was, what you were doing, where you lived, things like that, that we can validate with historic documentation and census records and things online, that's really fun. Again, you can't make this stuff up.
Mm.
And then we'll say, okay, how does it correlate with what Amy's going through in this lifetime? And there's always a connection. And so it's been my experience in doing this tens of thousands of times, literally, that we live multiple lifetimes with a similar basic script, and we're looking at that script from different perspectives. Like, I'm really interested in healing. A lot of ways to heal, not just medical, but emotional, grief healing, all of that. And and I've gone through multiple lifetimes where I've been a healer, different times, different places, different perspectives. And then we build on that, our spirit does. My analogy, I talk in analogies a lot because I think it gives our human frame of reference the opportunity to try and understand this a little more easily. And my analogy for past lives, Amy, is think of Hamlet. How many times has Hamlet been performed since Shakespeare wrote it in 1602? Who knows? But where was it performed? In what year? In what language? By whom? What was happening in the world? All these different variables. Was it inside? Was it outside? Who was the customer? Who was the director? It's a different perspective on certainly the same script. And that's what I see in our lifetimes, in our past lives. Certainly lots of nuances of things. We don't have just one main script. We have subscripts, like you're watching a movie and you got the main theme, but you got what's going on with Harvey and what's going on with Susie and what's going on with the dog and all these subscripts that are all part of the main script. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. It does. Because I think a lot of people, and particularly, it seems like we're going through a shift in consciousness and awakening and understanding. I think people are looking for answers more and understanding, I guess, asking the bigger questions around who am I? Is there more than this, or more than my body, more than my mind, more than my job, and what I'm doing, and searching for meaning and answers. And I think that that quest will continue and probably heighten over the coming years as more and more souls are waking up. And I think many look to, what am I here for, and what is my soul's purpose? So in helping people to understand more about their unique divine mission, would you
Mm-hmm.
say, I mean, obviously the Akashic Records is one way for people to tap into that. What's another way people in their lives can start to understand a little bit more about their unique, chosen, scripted mission?
I will ask them to imagine that they're a trust fund baby and they got more money than they could ever spend for the rest of their life and for two generations down, their children and their grandchildren. I mean, like
Mm.
oodles of money. And then I say, what would you do for fun? And they immediately have an answer. I said, that's your purpose.
Yeah.
Follow that. If you follow, and they'll say, well, travel. And I'll say, great. Find a job in the travel industry. You can work for a hotel chain. You can work for an airline. You can work for a whatever travel agency. You can work for a travel magazine. You can work for a gardening magazine that offers tours. Just take that first step and you're going to be led to the next step and the next step and the next step. Goes back to what we were talking about when we first began this conversation. It's all about joy.
Yeah.
It's all about what brings you joy. We go through, most of us at some point in our lives have had jobs that we hated, but we did it because we felt like we needed to earn money so we could pay the bills. And we're miserable.
Mm.
So focus on what interests you, what makes you light up. If it's travel and you think, well, I'll never make enough money and nobody's going to hire me because I don't have any experience, you're right. However, our thoughts create our reality. So take a step. Look up a travel agency, look up an airline, see if they're hiring. You're going to be led to the next step and the next step. And there's a really good chance that things will appear that you hadn't thought of. And your experience will be unimaginable because we're so limited with our own human frame of reference of what we've experienced and explored in this lifetime that it's unimaginable. We can't even imagine what we can create until we take action. I find that's the biggest thing that holds people back. Spirit's always communicating with us, always.
Yeah.
It's like you have satellite TV, there's 800 bazillion shows, that are playing at 7 o'clock on Saturday night, what channel are you tuned to? That's what you're going to receive. When we're on the spirit channel, because we're in joy and we're having fun, we can get those messages. When we're on the I feel crappy channels, which is a low vibration of anything that feels bad, grief, fear, anger, jealousy, boredom, whatever, spirit's communicating with you, but you're not tuned to the spirit channel because you're on the I feel crappy channels. It's really that simple.
Yeah. I love it. All of this, Julie, you teach so much about what I share as well. And I really want to highlight that. I mean, that following and acting on the joy and excitement. And I think that the tricky thing is for so long we haven't let ourselves feel and receive and follow that joy and excitement because we've persuaded ourselves into believing that anything has to be hard. Like we're married to the hard. We're married to the hard, and it has to make logical sense and it needs to be probable. And I love that your work is going beyond the logic and that quite often the maybe the steps that your spirit is guiding you to take are not going to make logical sense. And I share, the things that I have manifested, like that feel like miracles, they didn't make any logical sense.
Right. Right. And I talked to a friend this morning who met a man and she can't get him out of her head. And so she was saying, I'm gonna see if I can orchestrate bumping into him, to see if I can explore this. And I said, I think you taking action is you sending out that vibration, whether it's this man with whom you have a relationship or he introduces you to somebody else, she's looking for a partner, or he introduces you to somebody or something else that's going to really enhance your life. Be open. And we're so afraid, and we want to have a roadmap of, well, you do this, then this happens, then this happens, and this is going to happen. How boring would that be?
Mm,
I mean, for heaven's sakes, we're here to have an adventure. We're here to have fun and live a life of purpose and joy. If we knew everything that was going to happen, we would never create anything.
yeah.
And that's our main goal, is to create.
Yeah, I mean, the joy is in like if you were given a puzzle for Christmas and then someone was like, "Oh, I did it for you," you'd be like, "Oh, that's a bit boring." Like the whole joy is in like putting together the
Right,
puzzle and working it out and finding the pieces. Like if someone gave you a completed puzzle, you'd be like, "This isn't very exciting," right? So
right, right,
it's that co-creative experience as well, that taking the step. And I love that you mentioned that with that, where are you tuning your signal? Because so many of us are tuned into the broadcast of fear and doubt and negativity, and then wonder why am I experiencing all of this conflict in my life? And it's as simple as that. Like, what do you want? What are you tuning into? What is the
right.
frequency? And it's just so, so beautiful. I love it. If you could leave listeners with like a daily practice that you support people to like awaken their intuition or to feel more connected to spirit, like some, because obviously this process, as you mentioned, it's a practice. It's like building that muscle that's maybe got a little bit saggy and weak, and we need to reignite that. What's a practice we can do to help with that?
Think of a spirit, a loved one. You want to talk to Elvis, you want to talk to Moses, you want to talk to your grandfather. It doesn't matter. Doesn't matter whether you knew him or not. And ask them to send you a sign that you'll know for sure. Ask them a specific thing. Hey,
Mm.
send me a white bird feather. Be open to how it shows up. What we talked about before. It can be an actual feather, it can be a picture of a feather, it can be a feather on a hat, a feather on a piece of jewelry, a feather coming out of a down comforter, still a white feather.
Mm.
Just be open, ask for specific things, and then see what happens. And
Mm.
what you're going to find is when you do that, there will be more and more signs that will come in, like you'll see the same number 3 or 4 times. 333, 444, 1234. You'll see initials on license plates. My Ask Julie Ryan social media, we release a reel a day, and it's all about people saying, Well, I was talking to my mom, and my mom's spirit, one of my favorites, Amy, is I was talking to a woman whose mom had passed recently. And I find, and I'm sure you find the same thing, that most people, when they're first talking with their deceased loved ones, they think they're going to come in with some amazing advice that's going to just change their life in unimaginable ways. And they'll come in and they'll say, this woman said, you need to throw out your peanut butter. That's the first thing she said, Amy. My client's going, seriously, mom? That's the most profound thing you can say to me? And she had several little kids. And she said, the mom's spirit in heaven goes, seriously, throw out your peanut butter. And I said to my client, just go look at your peanut butter. Go see what the expiration date is. It had expired like a year. It was over a year, 6 months or a year over the expiration date. And she said, oh my goodness, I use that every day to make peanut butter and jelly sandwiches for my kids and their lunches. And mama from heaven is going, throw out your peanut butter.
Yeah.
And it's really fun what they come in with. What I find is once we get them talking, they get very chatty and they're coming in with all kinds of things. The other thing is, we can't control what somebody says when they're alive. We sure as heck can't control what a spirit says, what they communicate when they're in heaven. So be open. It's not necessarily be open to what they're going to say to you.
Mm.
It may not be what you want to hear, but most of the time, if you're working with somebody who really knows what they're doing, there are going to be a lot of things that you hear that are going to make sense to you and they're going to resonate. And they're going to be things that, again, you just can't make up.
Mm. What do you feel is going on when people say, I'm blocked, I can't do this? Do you have people that you meet that do your courses or that come to you or they ask a question and they just don't think that they can do it? What is happening there?
They're in fear. And I just say, yeah, you're right. You are, because that's what you're thinking.
Yeah.
Remember, attention, intention. Where's your attention? What is your intention in contacting this spirit? What is your intention in helping this person heal? All of that. And once they get out of the way of their fear, the other thing is what I've heard so many times from spirits in heaven is there's no right or wrong, there's no good or bad in the spirit world. It's just an experience. Now, we need to have right and wrong and good and bad in the human experience because none of us would live long enough to experience it. We'd all be killing each other. So it's a different reality. And yet, when people understand there's no right or wrong, they can't get it wrong. They can't hurt anybody. They can't get it wrong. It's all spirit working through us and with us. And if all spirit is pure love, they can't hurt anybody.
Mm.
They give it up and then they are really good at it. So they've just got to remove the fear and then take a step. You're going to get a sign. Ask again. Send me a black feather this time. Send me a
Mm.
purple feather. I had a client one time, Amy, that said when her husband passed, every day after he passed, she'd ask him for just a sign. And she said, and then it got to the point after he'd been gone for a couple of years, she was asking him for crazy signs. And so one morning she was leaving her home and she said, okay, show me a flying pig. She said, Julie, I promise you, I got to the stop sign at the end of my street. I turned out onto the main highway and there was a plumbing truck that had on the side of it a pig with
Wings.
wings on it. She said it was a pink plumbing van and it was something like, when pigs fly, we're going to be able to help your every problem. You worry about plumbing and you say when pigs fly, it's going to be healed. Well, yeah, we're going to come fix it because
Ugh,
pigs are always flying with our company. And she said, I about drove off the road. I was laughing so hard.
I love it.
And I
Oh my
have
gosh.
thousands of stories like
Yeah,
that.
I bet you do. I bet you do.
And
And
they're
yeah,
all
what
on
did you
my
really
Instagram and my Facebook channels and all
Yeah.
those other ones,
I'll
TikTok.
put all of those details in the show
Yeah.
notes, as well as a link to your podcast, which is fabulous. You have listeners that call up as well, don't they? And ask you questions.
Yeah, we release 3 shows a week, and 2 are
Mm.
interviews, and then one's a live show. We do it every Thursday night at 8 Eastern. I have a bunch of people that call in from Australia because it's already in the morning where
Yeah.
you are.
Mm.
And we can talk to your dad, grandma. We can scan your cat. We can do a medical thing. We can do a past life thing. We can talk to your spirit guides, your angels. It's a blast. I never know
Mm.
who's calling. I never know what their question's going to be, and I never know what spirit's answer is going to be.
Oh, that's so great. That's awesome. So tune in, guys. I will pop the details in the show notes. Anything else you want to share or anything else about how people can get in touch with you before we wrap up?
AskJulieRyan.com and Angelic Attendance, get your free copy, digital and audiobook. We got 7 other books. My 8th book's coming out at the end of the year.
Amazing.
So it's yeah, there's lots there. Lots of I think when we're taping this, we're releasing show 710. So we have
Wow.
hundreds of episodes and they're all terrific. They're all so interesting and I learn so much every time I get to talk to somebody. And you're going to be on my show.
I would
So
love
that'll be fun.
to. I would
Yeah,
love
yeah.
to. I think it's so amazing. I mean, when we say yes to the whispers, when we say yes to the nudge, it sounded like for you, like there wasn't a choice. It was coming in thick and fast. And I love hearing the stories of that. And, it's just such a beautiful reminder that no one's left out, no one's forgotten. God hasn't forgotten about you. Like there is something here for you and just starting to make yourself available for it to ask, to be specific, to look for the signs, like such beautiful messages that you have shared that are really tangible as well. And I love that. So it's just been such a delight. You've got the most amazing, beautiful, joyous energy. And I'm so glad that you said yes to this mission and you came out of the spiritual closet and
Oh
brought
my
that
gosh.
into your business. Just before we go, I just want to ask, did you find that accelerated your business when you were able to embody and incorporate the spiritual wisdom into it?
I've sold my surgical device manufacturing company before I started the Ask Julie Ryan stuff. And I thought, okay, now what? Well, God's going, yeah, write the book. And what I found is that I have started 9 companies from scratch in 5 industries. This is the first one I've ever done without a business plan, without measurables, without all of that business stuff. And people say to me, well, what are your goals? And I was like, well, I don't know. I don't have any. And they'd say, what do you mean you don't have any? And I'd say, I just don't have any. And they'd say, well, where do you see this going? And I have no idea. And it's just developed into this huge operation. We just had 75 people at my training in Atlanta that flew in from all over to learn how to do woo woo over the weekend. I say I'm a businesswoman who learned how to do woo woo, and I'm a buffet of psychicness. So they came in to learn the buffet of psychicness. So I have a lot of trademarks. I use that from my business acumen, being on a stage with a jumbotron teaching for 14 hours over a weekend. I use my business experience for that. Certainly writing books, I never wrote a book before, never thought I'd be an author. My 8th book's coming out. So it just
I love
unfolds
it.
in all of these different areas. I never thought that I'd ever be doing any of this. And it
That's
just
just
never
gold.
occurred to me.
That's just
Podcasting. How do you
gold.
do a podcast? People
Yeah,
go, you need
I
to do a
love this,
podcast.
Julie. I just think that it's such gold. I mean, I am wrapping this up, but I sold my business 2 years ago, which I built up over 15 years. We had yoga
Yeah.
studios and healing center, and I sold it. And then I was like, now what?
Yeah.
And my guide said, start a podcast. That was all that I
Yeah.
got. Start a
Yeah.
podcast. You
Yeah.
go into the void and you go through the whole death and rebirth. And now the guidance that's coming in so strong is write the book, write the book. And I'm like, okay. So I love that you shared
Well,
that.
and the thing too is that if you can read, you can do anything.
Mm.
I mean, you can do anything even if you can't read, but if you can, who knows how to do a podcast? I didn't know how to do a podcast. Did you?
No, and
No.
that's not the point, right? You say yes and it
The point
unfolds.
is, okay, and the people you need to show up when you need them, and the materials like. "Oh, what kind of mic do you buy? How do you
Yeah.
do this? What's going on?" Pope Clement was telling me to use Zoom. I said, "Well, dead popes know about Zoom because universal
I
intelligence, we
love
know it
that he
all."
told you to use
Yeah,
Zoom.
that was before the pandemic, when before Zoom was a thing. He said, "You use Zoom." We were still using GoToMeeting back then. And just everything, the people you need always show up right when you need them, and you got to take action. That's the key,
Yeah, yeah,
because
yeah.
we all have so many thoughts of things that we would like to do, and then later on in our lives we think, "Oh, we woulda, coulda, shoulda." Yeah, take action when you get the thought, even if it means looking something up online. Take action. The
Yeah.
next step will be revealed.
Yes, I love that. I love that. And I'm so grateful for this medium because I get to connect with amazing people like you on the other side of the world while
Yeah,
it's your evening and my morning. It's just, it's such a gift that it
I
connects
agree.
us in this way. So super grateful for that.
Absolutely.
Super grateful for you, Julie. Thank you so much for being here. I've loved this conversation. I know my audience will as well. So bless you. Thank you.
Thanks. Sending everybody lots of love from Sweet Home Alabama. Mwah!
Mwah.
In the southern
Amazing.
US. Yeah.